Heather Jackson, it is great to have you back on the Singletrack Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Vin. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Great to chat again. And yeah, doing pretty good. I was just telling you offline, I have been kind of nonstop the last 12 hours traveling from Tucson out to Bentonville with a couple of different travel snafus, but good to go now.
It's the fascinating life of a multi-sport athlete. Where does this podcast find you?
Yes, made it to Bentonville, Arkansas last night for, I actually have one Scrabble race coming up this weekend ahead of Javelina next weekend. So yeah, nothing like closing out the season with two more back-to-back weekends.
And I do want to talk about that as we get further into the Javelina discussion because I find that interesting. But I don't think we've talked to you since Western States, and I figured it'd be fun to sort of do like a retrospective on your first year in the sport. And when you think about it, like I'm pretty sure it kicked off with last year's Javelina. There's been a lot of success. The golden ticket at Black Canyon comes to mind. There's been some hardship too along the way, but like when you think about that first year and you think about, here's how I thought here's what I thought it would take to be successful from like a training and racing standpoint versus like the reality. What have been some of the biggest insights for you so far? Like what stayed the same? What's changed? What surprised you? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny because Javelina will be 1 year, my 1 year anniversary in kind of the trail running community. I was looking back on the calendar last year just kind of to see the lead in to the next, I guess, week or two. And it's crazy how different it was just because, yeah, my whole year had been focused on Kona and I had done, 3 very intense training months into Kona and actually Big Sugar gravel race and then Javelina were just
Yeah.
kind of these bonus fun events I was just literally going to go to. And now I find myself 1 year later, like totally hooked on both sides, but in a different way. To your question of what's changed or how are expectations and the whole past year that's gone down. I mean, it's night and day, I think, from the mentality that I had last year. Last year I was just like, oh cool, I'm gonna go run for a long, long time. And now it's like, whoa, all that I've learned, I guess specifically speaking to the trail running scene, just it's crazy. Like I think I held on to the triathlon slash that is road running. I mean, marathon type training for so long of like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep the quality over quantity. I'm just going to continue to do the same things, but maybe bring them onto the road. Onto the trails a bit more. And I think there is a good, that is good in some sense, but there's been so much more that I think I need to bring in and that I've learned from the few trail races that I've done this year, in terms of like just, yeah, spending time on trails, just getting out there and being on the trails. And that's for numerous things. It's for time on feet, extending long runs from my typical 2 to 2.5 hours, like getting out there for longer, getting out on trails and just getting experience learning where to put your foot versus just kind of the gravel roads I was running. I mean, that's been huge in terms of like the technical side, obviously. I mean, Javelina was my first trail race. And so that's what I knew. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can do this. But lo and behold, Javelina is probably one of the least technical trail runs out there. Hence why I'm returning. But
Well, one of the things that I find fascinating is when I think of like the two things that plague most trail runners the most often, it's heat management and it's nutrition. And from what I've observed, those have been like the two least issue-based factors for you, right? Like you just from like your background in triathlon, you've kind of nailed those things. You've already like uncovered what works for you in those areas, right?
I appreciate that. Those are, yeah, I could claim those as things that I have, I guess, learned about just through the Ironman racing. I think, yeah, certainly the heat prep. I mean, I had to prep for Kona for 10 years of like, yeah, and I have done the heat prep. I've done nutrition, I guess for that, yeah, 8 to 9 hour range and just dialing in, okay, these are the grams you're getting in per hour. This is the hydration strategy. So certainly I have those, I guess, carried forward from my years of experience in the triathlon realm. But I guess it is that other things that have just been the learning curve is huge. And it's one of those like, I mean, I'm still sitting here trying to figure out, okay, like how do you get to be, one of the how do you get to be a better technical trail runner besides just like going out and absolutely like going down every 10 years? I mean, I'm like out here on these technical trails and I'm like, how do people get better beyond just going out on technical trails and like tripping and falling every mile? And like,
yeah, I mean, like in Tucson, because you kind of split time between Tucson and Bend, and I don't actually know those areas very well, but like, can you go and get that type of terrain in those areas for these races?
you can definitely find it. And that's been this summer when I got back from UTMB. I'm like, okay, like you have to make the effort to go to these trails versus just a big part of triathlon training was like, you have 3 sports to train for. So your days are packed. So there's not really time to like drive an hour to a trailhead because you have to ride your bike for 6 hours. Then you have to do a runoff and then maybe get to the pool. So your days are, I mean, long already. So a lot of your life is about, I guess, really like maximizing your downtime in between the sessions. You're not getting in your car. You want to base yourself in the most prime area you can, near a pool, near great training grounds, great riding roads. Now with the trail running, like making the effort to, okay, get in my car and drive up to Mount Bachelor if I'm in Bend, or driving over to Mount Lemmon in Tucson, because there are those trails or different things that I need to work on in these areas. It's just, I think, letting go of the like, okay, I'm going to run from my door. I literally used to have my day planned out in triathlon down to like the minute. Like if I leave the pool by 8:05, I'm home by 8:15. I can eat. I'll be on my bike by 9, ride 9 to 3, 1 hour run off 3 to 4. Like it was so strict. And now it's like, okay, you need to put the effort in to learn these other things with the trail running specifically. So there are, to your question, there are those opportunities. It's just, being proactive and targeting those. And I've been doing the last, few months for sure.
I remember watching your race at Javelina last year in person, and then the Black Canyon race on the live stream, and just as an observation, like what came to mind for me, and I think my colleague Brett as well, is like, okay, you definitely have the athleticism, you definitely have the right mentality and the logistics to belong at the very top of the sport. You've had some results to back it up. Again, like thinking a year on from last year's Javelina, do you share that same level of confidence in yourself that like at any given start line you can be there for the win, you can be there for a podium, like it's your golden ticket, for example, to lose?
Ooh, that's that's a tough one. I mean, I think I certainly have that. I mean, I'm a competitive athlete. I've been a professional athlete for so long. Like when I go to a start line, like I want to win. My goal is to be at the front if I can. But to your question of like, do I think that when I'm at the starting lines? I mean, I think I got lucky almost at Javelina of how it went smoothly for the first, whatever it was, 80 miles. But I think I'm coming off of that as my first trail race. It was kind of this not accurate portrayal of how like the sport is, any race you do can be so different. So every single one can be so completely different. And I think I learned that very quickly, then going to Black Canyons and seeing how much more technical that was. And so I'm standing at a start line, certainly wanting to do my best and try to be at the front. Am I expecting that? Or no, not at all. I mean, yeah, it's, I think it's been very like eye-opening of like, and I love that because there's so much for me to learn and work on. And that's why I kind of moved into these new things. I've done triathlon for so long and it was almost like I was just on repeat. And now there's just so much out there to really, that I think I can work on and hopefully improve and progress with. And that's what's exciting to me, is that there is that like potential, and it gives me something to really focus on and go after versus, just kind of like, okay, like let's go out and nail this. What it's going to come down to is, say, the nutrition or dealing with the heat. No, I have like so many other skills to work on, which again, it's just exciting. It gives me like, okay, I'm plotting out all these routes in Bend. Like if I can go run at Smith Rock or these spots that, after UTMB, someone had mentioned that Zach Miller like prepped in Bend all in the spring, which I didn't know much about Zach. I've never met him or anything. I watched his unbelievable UTMB and I went back on his Strava and I'm like, oh my God, he was training a lot at Smith Rock. I've got to go there. Like he was at Black Butte, which is this other area. I'm like, I need to go run those versus just like the path I usually run. So for me, it's just exciting with so much that I could potentially work on.
It is cool to your point about Zach and training in Bend, especially just how much you share in common with that location, how much more a place comes alive with possibility when you see like the blueprint being done for it there. And he put together one of the best UTMB performances of all time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's so fun to watch you race. And like, I think back to last year again, like you held a pretty big lead through the first 3 laps of the race. I think everything seemed pretty good from what I remember from like to like mile 70 or 75. I recall you saying post race that like nutrition was fine. For you, it was just like the quads, right? Like just maybe not enough time spent on trails. And I don't really think of Javelina as like a technical race. There's like some points, but for you in this buildup, has it just been a function of like getting on trails more? And maybe that's the last piece of the puzzle you have to solve for this race?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it seemed like exactly what you just said. It was nutrition seemed fine. Heat, I was coming off Kona, so the heat really didn't seem too bad. It was exactly that. My quads by that third lap, it was just, my quads were so smashed. Like, and that's not even really, I guess, the most hilly course. It's a slight up and then a slight down, but it's very minimal, I guess, comparative to other trail races out there. But I still, every downward slanted step on that back half of the course was just painful. And so, this lead up, that has been very front of mind. And most of my trail runs have just been, most of my training runs, it's back on trail, but I basically run up a hill or up a mountain and then turn around and run as hard down as I can, really just trying to smash the quads. And whether or not that's an appropriate training approach of just like smash the quads as much as I can and hope that on race day they're used to that. That's been partly the approach, but I've basically just been going. I'll run like 10 miles uphill and run hard 10 miles down, turn around, do it again over and over. And it's been about that and just kind of a long, like lengthening out my long runs of just, and that's the other, I guess, tough balance I've been trying to figure out, where I'm like, okay, in a marathon build, you don't really usually run over the marathon distance. I mean, your long runs are anywhere from that 18 to 22 range normally. I think I would throw in a couple 24-mile days sometimes in my Kona prep, but for 100 miles, like how long are you supposed to run for? And it's like, you're not running 100 miles in practice maybe some people do. I have no idea, but I'm just like, okay. I mean, I did 50 miles like 3 weeks ago and I was like, all right, wow. Let's see. This is going to go one of two ways. It's either when I get there on race day, I'll be fine because I just did this, or I'm like currently making myself more tired than needed. So we'll see. But I mean, I've just been lengthening it out and hoping that endurance side of it and also just time on feet and the smashing of the quads will pay off.
No, it's super cool. And, the 50-mile run reminds me. So I listened to your episode with AJW, which was great. We'll link to it in the show notes. Great conversation. But one thing you said there that caught my attention was with some of the gravel races that are like 14 to 16 hours in length that you've done in the past, sometimes you'll do like a 3 to 4 hour run the day after or a few days after to simulate that like late stage 100-mile feeling that you couldn't necessarily get on a single runner, that you wouldn't want to do in training because it'd be too taxing, obviously, to run 100 miles in training. Do you suspect that stuff will pay off over time, and that's like an experiment that might, pay dividends?
I'm holding on to it because I hope it does, in terms of like this past year, I'm coming off of triathlon where that is what you teach your body to do. You're running a marathon off of super tired legs, and you never have the same fatigue in the legs as TTing 112 miles in training straight into a marathon. And so the idea is that you load that fatigue up with your long rides on Saturday, a shorter run off, maybe an hour. And then Sunday you get up and on heavy legs, you do that hard 20 miler. And so for this ultra trail and the gravel mix I've been trying to balance this year has just been the same line of thinking in terms of, running on heavy tired legs, where if a trail race is going to be 15, 16, 17 hours, I just rode 12 hours at Unbound and now I'll go run for 3 hours. That's hours 12 to 15. I think the biggest thing I've noticed this year and learned is that 12 hours riding my bike is certainly not the same as 12 hours running. I think the scaling doesn't seem to correlate as much as like in the triathlon at the shorter distances. Like you're running 12 hours is way more taxing, way more hard on the legs muscularly. And so I was sticking to that. Okay, I'll still do the like really long rides and just still keep my long runs quality at that 2 to 3 hour range. And I just think that doesn't give me enough, I think, muscular load necessarily that really parallels some of these longer trail runs, 15, 16, 17 hour days. And so that's kind of why I've been, at least in this Javelina block, introduced some longer days pounding on the legs. I think it does play a role to your question, the long rides into the runs. Those runs are hard. Like you feel so horrible the next day. Like you're just so tired. And it's not necessarily the muscular fatigue in the legs. I think it's mentally training and really good mental work, because you feel horrible and you have to like just keep moving forward. And so you do come up against that mentally in the trail runs. And I think that is good training for that, more so than I think the actual load on the legs.
Fascinating. And I've heard it's not quite the biking into running example, but I have heard some of the European runners, I think Jim has mentioned it before, that they'll do like a big skimo race and then the next day hop on the roads, or if there are like lower elevation trails available, hop on the trails and do a similar simulation. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, that's super cool. I know I've never done any of that. I skate ski in the winter, but not the skimo, but I'm certainly intrigued now that I feel like it's like a whole new world for me. It looks pretty cool.
Right on. Talking about Bentonville for a second, you're there for a gravel race. And, last year before Javelina, you did Kona a week before. And, obviously there's more involved there. There's the swim component, the running component, and the bike. In Bentonville this weekend, it's just a gravel race. I shouldn't say just, but it's just the bike component. Do you find that like heading into this year's Javelina, even with that gravel race, minus Kona, you'll be like a little bit more fresh for this year's race?
I think so. We were talking earlier about the Big Sugar gravel race. I don't think it is a 100-mile gravel race. I think it was last year right around that 6-hour mark. I don't think it'll be as taxing as some of the earlier gravel races this year, where it was just all out. This is kind of the season ender. A lot of people already kind of know where they stand in the Lifetime Grand Prix series. So I don't think, we'll see. I shouldn't speak so soon, but it's more kind of just, like end of the gravel season. I think it shouldn't be, knock on wood, too taxing 1 week out, also coming off of years of doing this. So I think 1 week out, I should be okay. To your question of fresher heading into Javelina, I certainly have structured my training leading in this year much, much differently than last year. I literally was coming off of Kona. So Kona, you taper for about, you kind of taper 2 weeks out. So I did my final long run 2 weeks out of Kona, which was 2 weeks out of Javelina. So that's 1 month out. I think my final run was about 20 miles. And then the volume comes way, way down, a lot of just sharpening. I did race Kona, which was a marathon, over 3 weeks out from Javelina. But then if you look at what I did last year, I look back on my training calendar and I was like, holy crap, you didn't even run. I didn't run for like 10 days. And then the week leading into Big Sugar, I did like a couple of jogs. And then the day after Big Sugar, I did a 75-minute trail run that was like 9 miles, and then Javelina. And so I think having 3 weeks of maybe 20-mile load was partly why I could not walk after Javelina for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I think the legs are much more seasoned, much more ready to really cover the full distance, hopefully.
Just a couple more questions. Here for the golden ticket, right? Like obviously Javelina is a great race, but here to punch a ticket back to Western States.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously not obviously. I had to listeners, I had a tough day at Western States this year. Certainly not how I envisioned it going. I had to drop about halfway through, and literally from the second my wristband was cut off, literally with a sword, I was just like, how can I get back there? So that's the ultimate goal of, yeah, targeting some of the golden ticket races. This one, there's 3 at Black Canyons if it doesn't go well. So certainly the eyes on that, and the ultimate goal is I want to make it to that track in Auburn. So yeah, that's the Javelina first stop. Try to get one of the 2 would be absolutely a dream.
I love it. Head now on the Golden Ticket Tour. This is the first stop, maybe the only stop, hopefully the only stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Last question. I'm curious about the shoe choice for this race. You know, Hoka is interesting. Maybe the Rocket X2 isn't quite right for the windier parts of the course, but like, I think you could get away with a road shoe. Like the Mach could be good. But what are you thinking right now? Like what do you, trail, road? Like what are you going to do?
I know, totally. I think I'm going to go to your point. I feel like, especially given my history with the ankle rolls now, that is new for me, but now it's very front of mind always. So I'm like, I think I've moved more towards the conservative Heather versus the like, yeah, fuck it, I'm going Rocket X to every race. I'm thinking right now, Mach X. I really like it. It's got some really good cush, but it also is light and gives you some propulsion similar to the Rocket X2. But I don't know. I was thinking maybe even lighter for the first lap or 2, but yeah, I'm thinking Mach X right now. It's my go-to. I'm gonna have 3 or 4 with me, but yeah, I just remember the last lap. I honestly might have Cliftons with me just for that extra cush for that final lap. I just remember every step of the final lap. You're just like, you're still trying to run, but it's not fast. So whether or not you have like the lightest shoe out there or not, I don't think is as important anymore. It's not as my like, oh, I need this race flat. It's more like, no, you want your body to have a little bit of give, 80 the final 20 miles and just get to that finish line. So that might be my go-to for the last lap.
Cool. Well, Heather, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. And we're really excited to watch your race unfold. We'll make sure to link to all your social media, the YouTube channel in the show notes. But yeah, just best of luck this coming weekend, at the end of the month. And it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Finn. Appreciate it.